Episode 15 of my training ultra running vlog as I'm running 100 miler on average every month for the third year in a row. And we can finally talk in the past about this because last weekend was my last official race of the season, Javelina 100 mile. Today's episode is actually a double header. I raced back-to-back 100 miler, first Diagonale des Fous, very challenging race, then Javelina 100 mile as my last race of the season. Hi, Simon here. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my running vlog. On this channel, you'll find documentaries about my ultra marathons, but also a lot of tip video to help you get out there, sharing my experience so that you can yourself push your own limit and have your own adventure. Today is the conclusion of the year as I'm racing 200 miler back-to-back 1 week apart, Diagonale des Fous and Javelina 100 mile. Two very different races, the first one being an extremely challenging race, very far from home, and Javelina 100 mile close to Phoenix, which was actually my first 100 mile on trail a few years ago. So today's episode will be a little different. There's not so much training obviously between those 2 weeks with the traveling and just the racing, but I'll talk a little bit more about the race themselves, just some high level overview, but of course I'll follow up with full documentaries about these races in the coming weeks. If we get into the specific, first I had to get to Diagonale des Fous, which is on Reunion Island. If you don't know where that is, that's actually probably the furthest I could be on land from where I live. So it was a very, very long travel. It took about 36 hours to get there. So I was very, very tired. And I decided I'm going to shake out my leg a little bit by carrying my luggage pretty far from the airport, so about 6 miles. At least it was some exercise and I was able to kind of fight the jet lag a little bit thanks to the sun. But of course, 13-hour jet lag, 36 hours of flights. When I was on Reunion Island, which again, 13-hour time difference, I could not take the full week off from work, so I had to work remotely, which means that around 6 or 7 in the evening, I would start my day of work and then I would finish at 3 or 4 in the morning. So I was very confused as to what was the day, what was the night. I was jet lagged, but at the same time, I was aligning my calendar on what was California time. And I wish I could have enjoyed the island a little bit more, but I really didn't have so much time for that and not so much energy. So the rest of the week leading into the race, except for a short shakeout run, it was just mostly walking around, and I record that as an activity just to say that I was not sitting all day, but I really didn't do so much. The race itself was high on my bucket list. It's one of these very iconic races, and what's interesting is that in the US you don't hear so much about a race like that, but it's probably one of the top 5 biggest 100 mile in the world. When I think of big race, big famous race, there's obviously UTMB, there's obviously Western State, Hard Rock, Mount Fuji, which I did earlier this year, and then another really big and famous one is Diagonale des Fous. Just size-wise, it was about, I think, 3,000 runner for the 100 mile, and in total with all of the distance, about 7,000 runner. Yeah, you heard that right. This is more numbers that you would associate with marathon running, not trail running. So huge race, huge organization, and it felt very special to be in a very remote location, very special location. The course itself, wow, that was extremely challenging. It was a very, very difficult race. It took me 53 hours. 53 hours to do a 100 mile. That is way more than my average time, which is probably around 30 hours. And there's many reasons for that. One is that you have about 35,000 feet of elevation climb. You're not allowed poles, and these climbs are very difficult. But most importantly, and what took a lot of time, is that the downhill can be very technical. It's very often on rocks that you could really hurt yourself. And on top of that, we didn't have great weather. We had a lot of rain, we had a lot of mud. It was cold a little bit, so you had to be extra careful. And when you combine the fact that you're out there for more than 2 days, towards the end, you're slow. It was also not my best race, not my best performance. I had really bad blisters, I had really bad ankle pain, and that's something that I will be talking about also for Javelina, but I really struggled for that race. This race was not my best race. For many reasons, the food at the aid station is not what I was used to. I felt that the variety was quite limited, so I basically fueled my whole race with Coca-Cola and bananas, which isn't much. I didn't have a crew, so I had to do it by myself. And my shoe choice was not ideal. But on top of that, because my feet were wet for basically 50 hours, I had pretty bad blisters. I think the shoes were okay, maybe a little too tight for me. So if I could redo, I would take half a size bigger. But more importantly, if I had a crew, I would have changed my socks, changed my shoes to take better care of my feet and avoid blister. The other unfortunate thing that happened over there is that I was wearing tights because I knew it would be cold. And unfortunately, they ripped apart in the private part, and that led to terrible, terrible, terrible chafing, which I'm still in pain about 2 weeks later. So not the best condition to be racing in, but also I just had a bad race, bad logistic, bad everything. But we made it, and I'm very glad I did it. Will I do it again? Probably not. It's really far to travel for a race like that, and if I would go back to do that, first I would want Nora to be able to join me, and I would want to be able to take actual vacation days instead of just flying out there, working remotely, being totally jet lagged, totally tired, then racing, then flying back on the same day. That was not the ideal situation. And it was worth it. It's a very big race. It's a very unique course, a beautiful landscape. We didn't see so much because of the rain and the clouds, but still what I could see was absolutely fantastic. And it's one of these races that, wow, it was so challenging. I think it's the most challenging 100-mile course I've done. It will compete with Uray 100. Actually, they're probably equal. One is more technical, the other one is more elevation gain. But it's a race I'm very proud that I was able to accomplish, especially that I did solo, especially that I did in pretty bad condition, both the weather itself, but also just coming in jet lag, tired, having no rest, and just having to go, go, go. Then, as I mentioned, right after the race, Sunday evening, I'm flying back to California. It takes again 36 hours, so huge travel. Then I have to catch up with work. So the rest of the week, I basically didn't do anything. I think I went for the gym one time, doing a short ride, very low intensity, then a little sauna session because Javelina 100 was coming up real fast. So I felt that a sauna session would maybe help. Maybe it's just placebo effect, especially so close to the race. The heat training that you do should not be so close to the race. But I felt, hey, like, let's just do it, and at least it's gonna play with my head in a positive way, thinking like, hey, I prepared for the heat. But that was it for training or recovery. And what's said or not said here is that obviously if I didn't have time to even do a recovery walk, that means that also my sleeping wasn't great. And there's this weird thing that happened. I was so tired, but had so many things to do, especially at the beginning of the week, that I was just dead tired. As soon as I would go to bed, I could fall asleep and I would spend the night sleeping, no problem. But as we moved closer to the race, then this extreme tiredness kind of vanished. And then the jet lag appeared. I was so confused at first. I didn't even know, well, am I feeling like it's the evening or the night or the morning right now? I don't know. So we drove all the way to Phoenix, and Javelina 100 was my first 100-mile on trail. So it's always exciting to come back for this one. It's actually my 5th time that I was doing it. And typically I will aim for a sub 24, but very quickly in the race, I realized that there is no way this is happening. I'm feeling terrible from the week before. My ankles were still painful. My Achilles were still painful. Even my quads were hurting still a little bit, which is something that usually I would not feel at all. The chafing that I had down there was partly healed, but not fully. And throughout the race, it just got worse and worse and worse. That was probably one of my chief concern, was my ankles being very painful. One of my IT band flaring up frequently, but the chafing, oof. It was really, really bad. It's not my first time chafing, right? And it's definitely not going to be the last. But it was by far the worst I've ever had. The type of pain that you're not even able to walk straight. So extremely painful down there. Not a great performance, but the race itself is always such a pleasure to be there. What's special at Javelina is that you come in with the costume if you want. Nora was able to join on this one to crew me, which felt great. That's the first time she's able to actually crew me since Leadville, which feels so long ago. So we were both wearing a costume. We also had friends over there where we could hang out and meet a lot of people. It's such a big happening that many other runners are coming along, or at least supporting people. So just the tent city, I saw so many people. So many of you guys were there. Some we ran together, some we said hi. So hi to everyone. It's great to meet in person. We also had Coach Brian, who had a lot of his athlete racing that weekend. Congratulations to all of his athletes. It was great to see Coach Brian, of course. Always fun to hang out. One of the other things that makes it special is that it's a loop course of 20 miles, and usually, again, that's not favorable. But in this case, because it's such a huge kind of gathering and almost party, you have really one aid station where you have crews, which is the headquarter. So it becomes this huge tent city with a lot of people hanging out, having a good time. And it's such a concentration of people that it really creates a great atmosphere, making it very unique for me. So I don't come to Javelina to, well, obviously I don't come to win a golden ticket because that's definitely not happening. And I don't come for the adventure as much as I would typically do for most of my trail run, but I come for the experience and the enjoyment of the people and the running community. It feels like such a big party. And for me, that was my last race of the year. That was the celebration of everything I've accomplished this year. This was my 16th 100-miler this year. And as you know, the races this year were pretty challenging. To think that the season started with Hurt 100 mile, I barely remember running Hurt 100 mile, but it was this year. And the rest of the year was filled with just as many exciting but challenging races. Just to name a few, if you haven't seen those movies, some that I really enjoy, Hurt 100 is probably one of my favorite races ever in Hawaii. Then in terms of big accomplishment, doing Fuji 100 mile, followed closely by Cocodona 250, my first 200 mile was such an epic adventure. Then I got to do my dream race of all time, Tour des Géants in Italy, 200 miles, such a challenging race. And everywhere in between them, there's so many races that I think, oh yeah, that was really cool too. For example, Tower Rim Trail 100 miles, that was great. Doing Zion, Antelope Canyon, and Bryce Canyon within the same year, that was amazing. And all of this was 2024. So Javelina for me was a way to kind of think back about everything that has happened this year, the ups, the downs. The biggest down for sure was Nora's injury doing Tour du Mont Blanc. But yeah, you have ups and downs and something like that, and thinking a little bit, okay, what's next? But before thinking about what's next and next year, let's take time to celebrate. And because it's such a gathering, it felt that a lot of friends and a lot of people that are close to me were there. Not everyone. Mark and Leanne, for example, couldn't be here this year. They said next year, so next year is a rendezvous. Javelina 100 mile. I'll put my name on January 1st to make sure that we go there, and hopefully Mark and Leanne will do the same. But yeah, it was a great celebration of everything. In this specific case, it's not the adventure. It's just thinking back about everything we've accomplished with the channel and everything. So that's it, folks, for this episode. But hey, 2 races of 100 mile in a 2 weeks period is quite a lot, especially when you consider all of the traveling. I mean, just thinking it's 72 hours of traveling, which is absolutely insane, and about 70 to 80 hours of racing. So busy 2 weeks. What's next for the rest of the year? Well, first, there's a lot of movies that are coming up. I have a Tour du Mont Blanc movie that I'm working on, Tour des Géants, 200 miler, one of my favorite. That one will take a little longer. I really want to take time to make a good movie, and quite frankly, I've been overwhelmed. You have Saddle 100 mile, Javelina 100 mile, Diagonale des Fous, and I have a backlog of tip video for you guys to get you out there ready for next year's adventure. Will I race more this year? There's nothing on the calendar yet. But obviously, I'll be recovered before the end of the year, so I'll actually look and think, maybe I can squeeze something else. There's Loup-Garou, for example, in Louisiana, which I've experienced in the past, and I loved it. And I know that this year or maybe next year is the last time, so I might try to do that early December. There's a few other races that I've been considering, for example, across the year, around New Year, depending on my plans when it comes to a holiday plan. But I'm not saying it's necessarily the last race of the year, but what is for sure is that right now I need some rest, I need to recover, and I'm going to focus on that. As always, thanks for watching. If you appreciate this video, if you think this year has been crazy and amazing, please leave a thumbs up, a comment below, and see you next time.